Oh,
look who it is. It's Mike
Hello.
Murphy.
Hi there.
Hi.
Greetings from Camp Freedom up here in New Hampshire. Live free or die.
Oh, very exciting. Hello, everybody who's joining us wherever you are. I'm in my basement in Washington, D.C., where I hide from my children. Welcome to Republican Voters Against Trump, our live stream. We are going to have a conversation today. I'm Sarah Longwell. I'm the founder of Republican Voters Against Trump, which I started with my friends Tim Miller and Bill Kristol. And Mike Murphy joined us on our epic crusade here. And I got to say at the outset about Mike, that Mike is like a total hero of mine. I wanted Mike's career. I wanted to be an operative who ran big presidential campaigns. That's who I wanted to be. And little did I know that fate was going to take this strange turn where the time that I would get to work with you is literally trying to beat the Republican incumbent. How do we find ourselves here?
Oh, we have a conscience and we were real conservatives. You know, it's our church. We got to fight to protect it. So, Sarah, I'm so proud of you and everything you've done with Bill and Tim and others to set up RVAT. And I'm very happy to be here. And I'm having a field day working with you, chasing the Orange Menace around with the help of many stalwart Republicans who know that, as we do, that, it's not the best career move, but your career moves aren't what you judge your career on. And if the Republican Party has decided to sell out to somebody who thinks he's Juan Perón, it's our job to fight, and we're doing that. So here we are, and I think it's good work, and best of all, it's working. The dissident Republican movement is growing, and it's helping Donald Trump to get in a tougher and tougher political situation.
Yeah, so
Lord's work.
Let me just give people an overview. I mean, if you're on this live stream, hopefully you know a little bit about what we're doing, but I'm just going to tell you why it all happened, just quickly. When in 2016, after Trump got elected, and actually prior to Trump getting elected, Mike Murphy will back me up on this, there was a lot of never Trumpers back then. Whole lot of people who didn't want to see Donald Trump become president. But after he got elected, those numbers shrank considerably. But there were sort of a hardcore few of us who really did sit around doing a lot of thinking about how do you save the Republican Party? And I think all of us arrived at one pretty basic conclusion, which was that you had to beat Donald Trump because he couldn't be the future of a responsible center-right party that was going to have, governing power. And so as we put ourselves to the task of, well, how do you defeat him? There were a lot of things that needed to happen. And some of them were things like Joe Biden needing to be the Democratic nominee and not somebody who was super far left. But for our part, what we thought a lot about was how do you persuade these sort of soft Trump voters? We always knew there was a core piece of the party who was never really comfortable with Donald Trump, that really didn't feel like he shared values. And so this project,
Putin. Okay, there we go. You dropped out for a minute. I smell the pause of Vladimir Putin on the internet connection, but so I don't know if it was just me who didn't hear your final point or you, but repeat it for my old ears to make sure I don't get the wrong question.
Yeah, sure. No, we were trying to figure out what actually was going to persuade these soft Trump supporters. And after 3 years of focus groups, one of the things that really came through was what they didn't trust the media. They don't trust Democrats. They don't even trust Republican hacks and elites like us. Not that I'm calling myself an elite. I'll call you an elite. But
badge of honor.
Who they trusted were people like them who they felt like, yeah, this is a Republican like me. And I understand where they're coming from on Donald Trump. That's exactly how I feel. And so we set out to build this community of Republican voters who were just disaffected with Donald Trump, who were going to tell their stories in real and authentic ways. And then we were going to find ways to distribute, make sure people in the swing states who were voters who were also, had voted for Donald Trump in 2016, but were really uncomfortable with everything going on in the world, and make sure that they saw them and try to build this sort of adjacent tribe, this new tribe, because voting is so political and politics is so tribal, that are people who are still identify as Republicans usually, but are going to vote for Joe Biden this time. So that's the project. That's what we're doing. And I'm happy to answer, and Mike and I can answer strategic questions as we go through. But since we're calling this Hacks on RVAT, which is a total ripoff of Mike's famous podcast with David, I just wanted to do some rank punditry today And
Okay.
find out, Mike, biggest news we've had so far since we found out Joe Biden was going to be the nominee. We've got our vice president, Kamala Harris.
Right.
What do you think? Is she going to play with our voters?
Well, I want to answer that, but let me go back because I want to talk about something you brought up and just kind of cover that before we get into the VP choice. So you're absolutely right. People have to remember that there's been a crack in the Republican wall. The media has always covered, 90% approval ratings. It's true for approval, people are tribal. But if you go back to the 2016 primaries, Trump won with a plurality of the vote. He only started getting a majority out. So when it was a contested marketplace, Trump was kind of a 42% candidate. And that was enough to get the nomination. But even in the early days of this, if you look kind of under the surface of the polling data,
Did we lose Mike there? Looks like maybe we lost Mike. So I'm going to vamp. Is the whole thing? Yeah, we lost Mike. Okay. So I'm alone. So I'll just tell you what I think about Kamala Harris and this the choice for VP. And when Mike comes on, I'll let him finish his bigger point about the Republican Party, which I think is a good one. But I just want to say, I've spent the last 3 years doing a lot of focus groups with these soft Trump supporters, these reluctant Trump voters, primarily women. And I haven't done one since the VP choice. I'm going to do some next week. But last week, I was testing them with people. With these soft Trump supporters. And I was going through the potential vice presidential picks. And I talked about, Karen Bass, Kamala, Elizabeth Warren. And one of the things that really struck me was just how undefined, both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are with our types of voters. One of the things that people forget is these are Republican voters. And so they didn't pay super close attention to the Democratic primary. So it's not like they, have a huge, fully formed opinion about Kamala Harris and all of her political views. In fact, as I was ticking through, Kamala had some name ID, Elizabeth Warren had some name ID, but there were lots of other voters, lots of other people in the focus groups who hadn't heard of any of the people I was talking about. I mean, I described Tammy Duckworth to some people and said, she was a combat pilot and had lost both legs. And people were like, wow, she sounds great. But they hadn't actually heard about her. And so I think that the idea, I saw there was a Vanity Fair piece yesterday that basically said that in Trump world, kind of the dude bros advising Trump were saying, Kamala Harris is going to scare the heck out of people in the suburbs. Well, having talked to a lot of suburban women in these focus groups, I just don't think that's true. I think that they look at Kamala Harris and think she looks like the person that they know, that is their friend and somebody, she's a lawyer, she's smart. And so I don't think that she's going to be that scary. Oh, look, Mike's back. Don't worry. I've been covering this whole time with all my opinions about Kamala Harris.
Okay, cool. Well, let's pick it up there. Sorry you lost me before. Just to come in for a landing, I was basically saying there's always been a crack. And now that Trump has hit a crescendo of trouble and the Democrats didn't nominate an Elizabeth Warren, there's a moment where Republicans are willing to protest and be a Democrat for a day for the larger cause. And that's what the permission campaign, as we like to call it at RVAT, is all about. You're not alone. In fact, as many as 1 out of 5 Republicans have real doubts about Trump. And if on election day, instead of Trump getting 95% of Republicans, which is kind of the normal number you want as a Republican president running for re-election, if it gets down to 85 or 80%, Trump's going to lose. So this marginal stuff, this seeing other people like them, as you say, is the best possible messaging. Anyway, Kamala. So anybody who's heard the Hacks on Tap punditry and all that knows I'm not a huge fan. I'm a fan of her story. I'm a big fan of her parents. I tweeted today that I thought they have a better American story than Trump does with his fascist, racist old man. But I thought this election The numbers don't lie. And it's not a personal opinion about her or anything like that. It's just the numbers. The suburbs are the key. And she's undefined. And I worry she can be defined in a bad way. Now, if you're part of the Democratic elite, you love her because she's great. But, those voters are banked. Biden has them. So what I think we're going to see now in the race is the Republicans go back to the old hits that every Republican operative, even the dregs who were left working for Trump, they've known this since third grade. It's going to be tax and spend. It's going to be taking away your private health care. It's going to be too soft on legal immigrants, give them a lot of free health care. You kind of know what the greatest hits are. And Dems like to kind of roll their eyes and snort, but Republicans have sold a lot of those records, so to speak. So there's going to be a moment for the Biden campaign and now the Biden-Harris campaign to have to power through a lot of that, or they're going to get defined. I mean, I'm so old, and I wrote about this in the Bulwark, which is, of course, part of our web of resistance here. I suggest you check it out if you haven't, that I remember the summer of 1988. I was sitting on the roof of a station wagon with a cameraman, and I believe Alex Castellanos was, I can't remember if he was on the roof or not, and we were driving through the combat zone in Boston, working for George H.W. Bush's reelection campaign, and we were behind anywhere from 17 points. And we were asking people at midnight as they drunkenly staggered down the alleys of the hard part of Boston where all the alleged sin was, what they thought, and they were answering us with, cursing us out, throwing beer cans. We didn't care about that. We just wanted the camera to get it all. And we made a little short broadcast film about Massachusetts. And once the Bush campaign found that the Massachusetts miracle was puncturable, and there's a furlough issue there, which you all remember, and the flag burning, those three things, that new information, which is what every campaign is about, was enough to eventually beat Michael Dukakis. So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have to be worried about being defined. That's the downside. The plus side is when she's good, she's really good. She's just been uneven in her own campaign. That worried me. We will see. The Biden people wisely have made a big deal out of putting their own staff around her, which is good, because then we won't have any runaway VP tickets like Palin and, has happened before. It was funny to me that Sarah Palin tweeted her advice, which was make trouble, go crazy like I did. Well, Sarah Palin is opening car lots right now for $300 in a Greyhound ticket. So my advice to Kamala Harris is don't follow Sarah Palin's advice on anything.
That's good advice for everybody.
Yeah, in general, in life. So bottom line is, I was for Gina Raimondo, who never made it because she's the best Democratic governor in America and says competence. I was for Gretchen Whitmer for whatever reason. But Biden went that way, and no VP is important enough to sink everything. So it's really not that important. And I think the Biden people, to wrap up here, have to be happy with the launch, because I have not seen the media gurgle with such joy in a long time. But this is the beginning of the campaign. It's really the end of the beginning. And now, if they can keep it about firing Trump, and they don't scare the Republican and independents in the suburbs to death with any left to center stuff, or let the Trump guys define them, Biden will win.
It's interesting. While you were gone, I was vamping and I was giving my kind of spiel on Kamala, really based on the focus groups that I've been doing. And it's funny that you jump back in with definition, because the point that I was making is with these voters, especially our voters, who don't pay a ton of attention to Democratic primaries, there's still a lot of white space, not just on Kamala Harris, but also on Joe Biden. I hear it all the time from these voters where they're like, I need more data. They know they don't like Trump. They dislike him intensely, but they're also tribal Republicans. And so they're looking for the things that help them make the jump over here. And what's interesting is it's less about, to some degree, there's affirmative things, right? Tell me what you're for on healthcare and stuff, and they'll take those data points. But the bigger piece is just don't scare the crap out of me, right?
Right, exactly. And that's what's coming.
Don't tell me you're going to defund the police. Don't tell me you're going to do Medicare for all. And I think that if they can resist the temptation, and I worry about this a little bit, because I do think that Joe Biden is one of the few candidates that I have seen in my lifetime where he actually ran as sort of a more moderate and is actually tacking a little bit left in the general, to make some accommodations to, some of the progressives who aren't as excited about him. And normally it goes the other way around, and you're tacking to the middle. And I think they should. I think he's been right on with understanding how to sort of be a moderate in this world where the Overton window has moved on what is both on what is a moderate, because I think he's still going to be quite a progressive candidate, certainly by our standards.
Yeah, but it's dangerous. I mean, I would tell Joe Biden, stop fooling around with your base. Your base will vote for a box full of horseshoes if it has a D on it. One of the problems we have in modern politics is both sides treat base voters like swing voters. They're not. The base is out there. You get that for free. And if Joe allows himself to be defined, and if we're spending September talking about tax raises, health care, free health care for undocumented immigrants paid for by the government, if we're talking about slave reparations, there are all kinds of nasty things Trump's coming around with about $500 million worth. And, we Republicans against Trump, we've had the easy work so far. Take the 10 or 15 or 20% that are uneasy about Trump, watching Trump screw up COVID and everything else, watching a 4-year history of incompetence, and say, you know what, enough. Biden seems safe. I'm going to go there. But now comes part two, where the Republicans are going to go back to the playbook that a lot of Republicans respond to. I mean, I like Joe Biden. I think he's a patriot. I'm going to vote for him. I've given him money, but I'm not ideologically happy with it at all. But that's going to be our challenge now as Republicans start hearing these ideological dog whistles. And God, I don't like Trump, but I had no idea that blah, blah, blah. And that's why the real battle is really about to begin, to kind of hold the Republicans uncomfortable with Trump after they've heard all the messaging that will come out of the Republican convention, that'll come out of advertising in September about Biden and Harris. So that's why I say it's the end of the beginning. Now comes the harder part of the sale, when the Republicans start handing you the, quote, fine print on Joe Biden. Now, half of it will be made up, like this stuff about his, her parents. But there's an onslaught coming. And with Trump, you got a guy with no filter and no compass and no interest in the truth. So, it's not only going to be awful, it's going to be half of it manufactured.
Yeah, how about this? One of the things I've always been struck by with Trump is how limited his playbook is. And we kind of go back to the well all the time. So I guess I shouldn't have been surprised to see a new birther conspiracy. I guess I was surprised to see Newsweek publish it. I don't know if he's mainstreamed this notion so completely at this point that now we're just always going to question the birth of citizens of any kind of hue of brown. Maybe that's just where we are these days. But what do you make of this this new attack on her? Is it going to fly?
Well, Trump's crazy. So the thing about crazy is you can't really change it up. It's not like you go to, Charlie Manson and say, all right, you got to give up the axe killing, and now we're going to do sophisticated financial fraud. He's got one channel. Trump's the same. So Trump's the atomic clock. If Trump could change and operate as a politician, he could have got himself in a position to very well be elected. But he can't. He doubles on trouble. So Trump will constantly pump out crazy messaging like this. And among his base, it'll work. They'll all repeat it. Hey, did you hear Kamala Harris is from Mars? No, that's terrible. We can't have a Martian president. But the problem is Trump's base isn't enough to win the election. Trump is in a demographic cul-de-sac of old white guys, which is the shrinking part of the electorate. Now, that said, and I think with Bill Stepien, who's the new yes man who replaced the old yes man, Brad Parscale, the guy who collected the Ferraris, what Bill's trying to do, because he knows Trump's crazy and can't do anything about it, is Bill's just going to have the RNC machinery do what they know how to do, which is the liberal scary campaign. And that's what I mean about playing the old hit. So I don't think Trump's going to break the race wide open with crazy tweets, but the slow grind, what I worry about is the same media herd instinct and obsession with process that got like Newsweek to break through, oh, we have a new crazy issue to debate on cable for 2 weeks about, her parents. It's a total smear and it's not true. But that's food for the mill. And if the Republican convention, which will be both a clown show in Hannity's basement, but the content of it will be rough stuff, and some of it will cut. So the race will probably, not certainly, but there's a good chance it'll tighten in the polls. And then the media will say, Trump's coming back. He's alive. And then the liberals will completely panic. The Republicans are the stupid party, and the Democrats are the neurotic party. So they're going to completely panic and go nuts. And Trump could have, a little bit of a comeback in September. And then there'll be all this second guessing of Harris and everything else. And is Biden up to it? And, it'll be a bumpy time for the Biden campaign. And then just to finish the nightmare scenario quickly, the thing I worry about the most, because look, I think Trump's going to lose. I'm doing everything I can to help.
and I'm proud to be part of all this. But I spend my time being paranoid about how it could go wrong, because if it goes right, it's fine. Everybody can go to bed. But let's work about the can go wrong. I think we're so beaten down with COVID. We're so economically tired of it. We're so fearful. The biological pain among friends and loved ones is severe. The economic pain is severe, that the slightest hint of good news could start a mania. Keep in mind, and I've got a Washington Post piece coming out on this, there was a time in the 17th century where the price of a tulip went from the price of a tulip, a couple of guilders, to the price of a house. And that took about 75 days, which is about how long we've got the election. So if leaks start coming out, that the big vaccine trials that are underway right now with 30, 40,000 people, by late September, October, it starts leaking out, which in the world of Twitter and social media and everything else will happen, that they're incredibly effective. There's going to be this mania. There's going to be a cure. The market's going to shoot up. People are going to, humans are like crowd stampeding animals. So I worry there's this moment in October where we have this false sense of euphoria that COVID is over. By then, they've done a number on Biden. He's economically scary. And if you talk right now to Republicans and independent voters who are undecided, Republicans who aren't for Trump are thinking of voting for Biden, and you ask them who's better on running the economy, Trump or Biden, Trump beats it 2-1.
Yep.
So,
yep.
I see that perfect storm at the end of October. And that's the thing I think the Biden campaign and us and everybody else has to really be ready to get in front of, and not let Trump have that mania surge at the end of the campaign if they've damaged Biden. Sorry for the long answer.
Yeah, so now that you've freaked everybody out and scared everybody.
Everybody get up an hour early and stop telling your Republican friends they're morally deficit for voting for Trump. That helps Trump. Nobody wants a liberal to come up and tell them they're an asshole because they're for Trump. That doesn't help. What helps is saying Trump's not a conservative. Biden's a moderate. We can repair the country. Those sort of messages. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Sarah.
But I want to do one thing. So it's one thing for us to sit here and speculate about how our voters are responding to Kamala Harris. It's another thing to actually hear from some of them. So we have got Sarah from Ohio is going to join us here for a little bit, and we're going to find out from her. Hey, Sarah. Thanks for hanging out.
Hi, Sarah.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. Hey, Sarah, I got to tell you, we don't know each other, but can I ask you a question? What is your middle name?
Catherine.
Okay. I'll tell you, 50% of the time I get an Elizabeth on that answer.
Yeah.
Yep. So I got to tell you, you have one of my favorite RVAT videos. It's so authentic. It's so perfect. In terms of you just saying exactly how you're feeling, what you think, a really impassioned plea to vote for Joe Biden. But you've been a Republican your whole life, come from a Republican family. But tell me, when you heard that Kamala Harris was going to be the vice presidential nominee for Joe Biden, after being somebody who was really ready to vote for Joe, did that change anything for you, or what'd you think?
Well, actually, I was ready for it. So I did my research, and I bought a Biden-Harris shirt like 3 weeks ago. I'd done a video with, one of these chat sessions with Dr. Biden. I wanted to listen to Jill Biden, and it had Kamala on it. And she made a comment on there, and I was like, that's who Joe's going to pick. I know he's going to pick her. So I was pretty stoked. All the candidates were great, though. I think the thing I like the most about Kamala is she believes in the concept of a country. You can tell how a country is by how they treat their children. And I've got 4 boys, and so kids are important to me. And, it really broke me when we did the separation at the border, and when all that happened, we were putting kids in cages. And that was the point for me when I was ready just to take, storm the Capitol and throw Trump out of office. So knowing that about Kamala really just made it solid for me. And I think it's a great pick. I trusted who Joe would pick, and I knew he would do well. So I was pretty happy with it.
And so as somebody who's been sort of a Republican all your life, you talked in your video about your family all being Republican, but you also said they're all voting for Joe. So did the people in your community there in Ohio, what do they think? Are they excited by this? Do you think that she'll play well out there in Ohio?
Well, it's funny because I actually told my mom she had to sit in here with me. They were looking longer than me. just today we drove down Lincoln Highway and there are Trump signs everywhere. Mom and dad and then myself and my brother's property were like a mile apart, and we've all got our Biden flags out, and I think we are the only ones in the county. My husband went to Walmart and a lady was wearing a Biden mask. He said it's the first one he's seen, and he said, "I like your mask." And she said, "Well, my sister's in from DC and she's wearing one too." So we're starting to try to turn the county blue, but we're pretty red here, and it's a little scary. And Mom and I have been talking about how do we talk to people. So the conversation that you and Mike have been having about, how do we talk to people and tell them that Trump isn't a Republican. He isn't even a Republican. I don't know why he ran in the Republican primary. He wasn't a Republican before. I think he's been a Democrat and an independent, and who knows.
It's true.
He's not a real Republican. And Joe is the closest thing to Republican that I've seen in a long time. It's the morals, it's the things that I grew up with thinking that, Republicans were. You work hard, you take responsibility, and I'm not saying that's not what Democrats are. It's just a dumb farm kid from Ohio thinks mom and dad are Republican. Well, that's what a Republican is. You don't realize the politics behind it all. So I've been watching the chat while you guys were talking, and like J-Flo and Juliana, they're all saying like Biden's a decent man. He's a good man, strong family. Like that's the stuff that resonates with people. The other stuff's all just smoke and mirrors, right? And
I think that's the greatest advantage to Biden, that he is decent and he understands the job of the president is to be head of the country, not just head of a political party. And I think people are craving that now because he's in many ways the opposite of Biden that way. So the more the campaign, frankly, is not about ideological differences, but about who can unite the country and who puts the country first versus somebody who's on an egomaniacal crazy ride for himself. It's all to Biden's advantage. And I think people just read that, which is another reason why Trump's having more and more trouble with the kind of voters that normally support Republicans.
Well, I've always said you can't really fix people if you're not working with a good person and they won't work with you and they won't listen and they'll fire everybody around them and blame it on everyone else. You can't fix politics, right? But policy's something we can work on later. Let's hash that all out after we've got a good guy to work with, right? So,
yeah, and who has relationships with Republicans. I mean, if you were to take a secret poll of Republican elected officials, Biden's more popular than Trump in the Senate for sure, because they know they can wheel and deal with Joe, and it's not like you have the negotiation at the end he tries to stab you in the eye with a fork. I don't want to sink the Biden campaign, but one of the little secrets in Washington is that there's one Democrat who can go into a private room and cut a deal with Mitch McConnell, and it's Joe Biden. Yeah, they actually have a pretty good relationship. Right. Well, so you want to, with a big kabuki theater show we put on for the voters, unfortunately, but in the end, you need a couple of politicians to get in a room, make something happen. And Biden, even better than Obama, there's a good piece in the Politico about that today, understands that, which means for a restart, he's totally well equipped for that.
Right. And someone else put on there, Amy D, she wrote, are Republicans about the person or about the issues? Because that's another big thing that a lot of people will say to me is, they'll throw out abortion. That's a big one everyone talks about. And I'm like, newsflash, no one's for abortion. No one. It's about freedom of rights and so we'll get into those conversations, but they go low real quick about one. Mm-hmm. And they don't get back to the basics. So
Sarah, can you tell us more about that? I mean, I'm interested. If you live in this really red county, and I'm from a similar sort of part of Pennsylvania, I think, and I went to college in Ohio. But tell me, what do you hear from people about why they're so dug in on Trump? What do they like about him?
I hear the guns issue. They're my guns. I hear the economy issue a lot. It's all about money. And I don't think they realize that it's about the upper class that Trump is helping. They don't realize that it's the hardworking, farming, Americans that are. I get frustrated with the healthcare argument is because farmers don't get healthcare. We have to get our own, right? So this whole concept of, the hardest working people in the country aren't being considered for healthcare. Are you kidding me? Like, why are Republicans not opening their eyes to some of these issues and seeing that just because you take on some ideas that might appear to be socialistic, it doesn't mean you're a socialistic. I mean, public school, that's paid for by our taxes. The military, I was in the military. They paid for my school, right? Mm-hmm. And we're not a socialistic country because we do those things. So why are we not thinking about and taking the good ideas from all of the ideas instead of going extreme? And, it just, I don't know how to, they just whittle down on one thing or focus on one thing, and they don't hear you. They don't consider it because they've got those buzzwords in their heads. I don't know. Is there, mom shake?
It's tribal. It's tribal. This is the nature of politics now. I'm right, you're evil.
Well, Sarah, I got to tell you, you have been an incredibly popular video. It tests through the roof. People love you on social media. You were in the vets video that we cut, and you were the only woman in the vets video.
Yeah, we got to have the women in there.
Funny, people, send us these angry emails like, "Why don't you have more women in your ads?" And I'm like, "Do you know how many? First of all, there's fewer women in the Republican Party. There's fewer women in the military. To find all of those things, and then then who are also opposed to Trump, like." Come on, you were awesome in that video. You've been awesome the whole time. We really appreciate you just sort of standing up for what you believe in, because I got to tell you, we can talk until we're blue in the face, but no one cares what we think. People are deeply, deeply interested in the things that you're saying and the experience that you're having. And I think that you're giving other people courage to stand up and say the same thing, because I know that a lot of people feel the same way that you do. Even if you're feeling, and just thinking about the fact that you're kind of, you feel lonely where you are, like there's a lot of people out there that feel lonely like that, and you've made them feel less lonely. And so we just really appreciate, you working with us on this.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad that I can help. I wish I could do more.
You just keep being you. Come back and talk to us again sometime. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Mom.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye, Mike.
Bye-bye.
All right.
All right. Well, look, if you know somebody who could be our next Sarah, you can make a video too. I think you know all about it, but you go to rvat.org. You can see hundreds, over 500 other people, and you can help too, or help recruit people to do it, because the videos that people respond to the most, we're spending millions of dollars to pump out in front of, Republicans with doubts in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, et cetera. So help us in our work by being part of it.
Great plug. Appreciate that. You're a real pro. All right, Mike, I want to get to some of these questions that we have. And so this is from Chris. He says, do hardcore Republicans actually believe that Trump has managed the pandemic well?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they're hardcore Republicans. They're voting for the team. But again, I've got some polling we've done. We're looking at a big project we're going to be talking about in a week or two. And among Republicans who are not committed to Trump and independents who are not committed to Trump or Biden, a good chunk of them, particularly Republicans, rank Trump higher than Biden on handling COVID. But that's a number that the facts oppose and a number that can be moved.
Okay. I will say too, one of the things that I think, just having listened to a lot of the focus groups, is the thing about the coronavirus is that it's really geographically specific in terms of people's personal consequences that they feel because of it. And so
it's the biology versus the economic. If you're getting economic pain, but you don't know anybody who's sick because a month ago you lived. I mean, up here in rural New Hampshire, we have 1/10 the infection rate of Los Angeles County, where I normally win. So the attitudes can be a little different.
That's right. And so what I think people sometimes don't realize is for people, so I did a focus group in Wisconsin at one point, and Wisconsin's shut down, so they're feeling the economic pain, but they've got very few cases of COVID-19.
Right, exactly.
And actually, their anger is at people who are keeping them shut down. And so I think that people sort of assume that COVID is all about people being frustrated with Trump's handling, but there's a reason that he's leaning into hard we got to open up, we got to do this, is because there's a lot of people who are not in hotspots who are like, we can't be locked down.
Right. I'm losing my family business. My kid won't go to college because people are sick in Queens. That's where it started. But what's been changing, interestingly, is as the biology states, Trump, with a shtick that worked early, is being caught flat-footed because COVID is no mysterious thing biologically now in Texas, and in other key red states. So, COVID is eating Trump. I mean, the whole campaign in the last 4 months has been Trump versus COVID, and COVID's winning. Biden's been able to be on the sidelines, and that's been fine with Biden. So Trump made some bet that the disease would never spread out of the blue states, and that was incredibly stupid politically.
Very stupid. And I wish more people held him accountable for how poorly he handled this thing from the beginning. I mean, the fact that he still gets sort of high marks on the economy, which he does. I mean, I still hear people think he's got some magical power. And I think a lot of that's just deeply rooted in the fact of people have this instinct about him from his time as a reality television star, where he was kind of this carefully curated businessman. And people think, well, he's a businessman. He can figure this out. And to me, obviously, it's baffling that the evidence in front of us, which shows that he is a terrible negotiator, a poor manager, a bad executive on all levels. But people don't necessarily still believe the myth a little bit.
Oh, totally. He's what we in Hollywood, when I'm not in the weird funhouse mirror land of politics, I work there too. He's what we call a pre-aware title, which is because he was on primetime television for 10 years, even if he was firing Gilbert Gottfried for not selling enough cotton candy, things in some phony contest. He's perceived as a can-do business guy. Art of the deal. He'll make it work. One of the biggest broken promises of the Trump presidency has been people thought he could get something done because they thought art of the deal. He won't listen to the politicians. He'll do what's right. And that's been totally shattered by his own selfish behavior. And anybody who's really studied him in business knows that, he's a fool. He's been lucky on a few things, but if Trump had taken his inheritance, because Trump made his real money the old-fashioned way, inherited it, and he had put it into just a index fund in the stock market, he'd be far richer. There's a great book, by the way, if you want even more Trump in your life. I don't know if anybody does, but it's called Trumped by a guy named Jack O'Donnell, and it was published in 1993 by Simon and Schuster. Jack was an executive who Trump hired to help run his Atlantic City casinos. And Jack went from like, wow, I'm going to work for Donald Trump, I'm going to learn so much, to, oh my God, he's a madman, keep him away. And it's hilarious, but it really gives you a look into his business skills are just as bad as his presidential skills.
So, Mike, I got to ask you, because this is a question I get asked sometimes, and I'm sometimes overwhelmed by it myself, and I'm interested in your thoughts. So we got 170,000 people have died. We've had
at least,
massive protests. Economic unemployment's we're heading for maybe a double dip recession. Unemployment's it's an all-time high. Why isn't Trump doing worse?
Well, he's doing pretty bad. If the election were held tomorrow, he'd be fired, and the Democrats would win the Senate. So, Trump's numbers have been terrible since the day he got elected. People forget this. It's kind of Trump's best thing has been this Rasputin mind twist on both the media and, the neurotic wing of the Democratic Party, which is, well, Nate Silver said he was going to lose in 2016 and he won. So Trump has a magic ram's horn he can blow, and all these hillbillies vote for him and he can't be beat and, blah, blah, blah. Since Trump took the oath of office, we've had the worst congressional wipeout for the Republican Party since Watergate. We've lost 9 governorships. We've lost a ton of state legislative seats. Every time we hold an election, the Republicans get punished. So then COVID came along and made it even worse because people are feeling the pain. So the stats are kind of devastating, but Trump has really bad numbers. Election were held tomorrow, he'd get beaten like a government mule. So, I get that, but where the country's so tribal that people do process things in a kind of a weird way where they kind of filter out bad news about their guy. But Trump's down to the bare bones now, the 42%. So if nothing changes, then Biden's going to do fine.
So there's this new poll out. I don't know if you saw it. Did you see that somebody polled 2024?
Oh, God help us. No, I did not.
Okay, so they polled 2024. They did both the Democrats and the Republicans. I'm just going to tell you the Republicans one because I can remember it off the top of my head. do you want to guess who the top 3 were for the Republican side 2024?
Yeah, let me say, as a guy who reads polls and commissions them for a living, that most polls are bullshit.
Sure.
They're a noise meter of what happened last week. But that said, it'll be Don Jr., Ivanka, and, oh, God, I don't know, Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson.
So those are interesting guesses, all people who placed on the poll. But I was shocked to find out that the number 1 vote getter was one Mike Pence with 31%, followed by a staggering 17% for Don Jr.
Right.
And then the next highest was Nikki, was at least a sane choice with Nikki Haley at 11%. And then down at the bottom, I think Tucker got 7, Ivanka got 3. Not great, but it raises the question: what is the future of the Republican Party, Mike?
A huge Pier 6 brawl. There are 2 theories of this. One theory is, after Trump, Trumpism will elect the next candidate. Will Trump run again? Will he primary his own kid? Will Don Jr. run? Will Tucker run? Will Tom Cotton run? There are a couple of senators who kind of have a Trump suit they can wear. That's theory 1. It may be true. I think Trump will kind of have the same post-election experience that Sarah Palin had and that Jesse Ventura, governor of Minnesota, had, which is like a rotten fish. They're quickly in the rearview mirror. There's the stink lingers around, but they don't have a lot of power because political parties don't like losing. If the Republican leadership could bump, a senator once made a joke to me that I really laughed about 2 years ago in the beginning of Trumpism. He said, if Trump ever came into a Republican Senate caucus meeting and you turned out the lights for 2 minutes, you turn it back on, he'd be dead. So there's a hostage situation going on. So I think it'll be more normal, which is different wings of the party will come forward. The problem is we've trained the party to not govern, but to oppose. So a Tom Cotton type or Josh Hawley is going to sell some tickets on the I'm right, they're evil thing. And you've got Fox News and increasingly OAN as an amplifier. On the other hand, if the Democrats, I think Biden's going to have a tough time. A lot of reasons. It's going to be a tough 4 years. And if their progressive wing is in ascendancy, which I think it will be, there's going to be a center-right pushback to that. And there's going to be a vacuum for somebody or some people to compete for that. So I think it's going to be like the Chinese Civil War. You're going to have 20 warlords running around with small armies declaring themselves emperor. And it won't really be cleared out until the 2024 Republican primaries.
Yeah, how much of a difference do you think it's going to make? I'm sort of one of these people who, part of the reason I think our strategy is so important is that I think that Donald Trump needs to get wiped out. I agree. To feel like they've lost the suburbs, they've lost women, they never had minorities and they're never going to get them. And to really feel that sense of the time in the political wilderness as a result of these bad choices. We are not, as a campaign, working on anything down ticket. And look, I love some of my moderates like Susan Collins and things like that, but they have behaved horribly.
Yeah, no, it's gutless. It's not like we asked them to land on Enzio Beach or anything. I wrote a Bulwark piece on this. I'm really torn about get rid of everybody. I definitely got to crush Trump down to atoms. Or is there a better world where McConnell hangs on to the Senate by 1 vote because that gives Biden somebody to fend off Biden's, Democratic left with? And I'm a conservative. Policy counts to me. I don't want the AOC agenda. I think it's insanely harebrained. So, I don't know. I vote in California. It doesn't matter. My vote's useless in the national politics. But I'm really torn by that. But I do say this. If the Dems win everything big, the incentives in the Senate will be for flame-throwing opposition, which could smother out some of the kind of Republican opportunity conservatives I'd like to see take ascendance in the party. It's just a tough question. The key thing by a factor of 1,000 is beat Trump.
Yeah, but who do you think should be ascendant? Like, who do you have in mind to lead the party going forward?
Well, it's not really a personality. It's more an ideology. I think message is almost more powerful than candidate. Look, I love Larry Hogan. I like Charlie Baker. I'm more conservative probably than both of them, but they understand the idea. I made my career in politics working for all the governing conservative governors, the Jeb Bushes, the John Englers, the Tommy Thompsons, and many, many more. And I like those folks because they wanted to use government as a tool of opportunity, but with kind of a market-based outlook. And they were very good at running government. I mean, Michigan got to the point where we had counties with 0 welfare cases. I mean, they knew what they were doing, and in reforming education and other things. The problem with a lot of the senators is they know how to preen and they know how to oppose. So I always looked at governors as the best potential candidates generically. And, we've got to grow a crop. And there are a few, but I want somebody, Ben Sass on the Senate side, admittedly, isn't bad. He's gutless, but I think he gets it. I think he gets what the future of an opportunity conservative can be. So step one is you've got to take kind of the political virus of Trumpism away, so you can kind of open the thing up and have the debate honestly. And, that's day one after the election. I like to joke, my Republican friends say, Mike, you served the party for 30 years. I notice you haven't left the party yet, but how does it help us to get, bombed back to the Stone Age by the Democrats? And I say, well, it helped Toyota. They had nothing left in 1946, and they built a lot of brand new factories with brand new ideas, and it worked out okay for them. So, let's find the opportunity in the rubble.
Yeah. Well, we're here to make the rubble and then to try to see what we can make out of it. All right, Mike. Well, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate all of you who joined us and listened to us.
Thank you.
And make a video if you can, if you're a Republican voter against Trump. Donate, go buy some swag. Do whatever you can to go out and vote and help us beat Trump. And thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.